Yay. Okay,
Yay.
we are live with Verdigris, Sam and Brian Brinkman, who are 50 minutes away from their closing of their auction piece, Betty's Notebook, on Async Art. Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
Sam,
Great to
I'll
be
pass
here.
it on to you to introduce Verdigris.
Sure. So we have several players here today, and let's just go ahead and go around and do like a quick introduction here. We'll start with some of the choir members. Meredith, why don't you go ahead and start?
Hey everyone, I'm Meredith Tompkins. I've been singing with Verdigris for about 2 to 3 years now. And this project was so much fun. We've just been kind of waiting with bated breath to see all the things that have come from this project. And so I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks. Jason.
Hey everybody, my name is Jason Aubrey. I sing bass with Verdigris. This was my first gig with the group, so kind of excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks. Keith.
Everyone, I'm Keith Lathrom. I sing tenor in Verdigris, and this is the first concert that I participated in. I sang for the very first fundraising event, and glad to be back and a part of this amazing project. So,
Awesome. Nick.
Sam. My name is Nicholas Reeves. I'm the composer of Betty's Notebook, and this piece was nothing less than a leap of faith. It took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get us where we are. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, agreed. And it's been so worth it and really awesome to see this through from start to finish. Brian.
Hey, I'm Bryan Brinkman. I'm the visual artist behind this piece and the collaboration, and I created the programmable visuals of the piece.
And Sam.
Awesome. Thanks, Mikkel. I'm Sam. I'm the founding artistic director of Verdigris Ensemble, and really happy to have these people around me, literally screens around me, and really happy to celebrate this moment with several choir members who I think some of them are going to be coming in a little bit, and some more members as we go on. But really happy to be here and really thrilled at this result. We've been working on this project for like 3 years, so it's been quite a ride, and wonderful to see it through.
Amazing. Well, it's so good to have you all here. And actually, I think, it would be great to talk a little bit about the experience, I guess, even for you guys, like for Verdigris to come into, this world of NFTs and programmable music, and obviously like a huge moment for Async as well as a platform who launched Async Music. It'll be great to get your thoughts and what was your like, how was your experience, what did you think about it, and
I think like it would be great to hear actually like maybe from the singers about like their perspectives. I mean, I think Brian, Nick, and I have been talking a lot about like our thoughts on Async Music, but I'm curious to see sort of like what your guys' thoughts are and what your experience has been from start to finish, because like Meredith, you sang in the original performance in 2019, and Keith and Jason, sort of the experience of singing in the recording studio. Would love to sort of start with that, just to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that, because one thing that Sam mentioned is that I was one of the singers in basically the first round of Betty's Notebook, is what I kind of like to think of it in my head. And we sort of piloted it as a live concert that we performed in various places, one of them being, what was the name of that theater, Sam, in downtown Dallas?
Texas Theater.
Texas theater. That's the main place that I have some very strong memories of performing Betty's Notebook, because it's such a historical venue and it used to be a theater. So it was very interesting bringing Betty's Notebook to that place, and the lighting was so cool, and we had all this mixed media. And even back then, that was for lots of groups in Texas, that was kind of a big deal, adding all kinds of mixed media to that. And so we had Sam let us know, we had a feeling that Betty's Notebook would come back, and we had no idea in what form it would come back into. So the added creativity of singing this piece in a recording studio separate from half the choir in the middle of a pandemic at the same time with masks was just a very interesting experience, and kind of allowed us, I think, to dig into some of the emotions that are happening in the piece, this juxtaposition of hearing Betty's cries for help on the radio and at the same time recording these jazz standards. And we didn't necessarily record them all at the same time separately. We had, sometimes we would sing a jazz piece and then we would go back to Betty's Notebook. And so the recording of the piece actually turned out to be a lot like what the end product was, where it's constantly interrupting itself. And so the creation of it was also part of that creative process, which is a very, very cool thing to experience.
Really quickly, before we move on any further, I just really want to introduce Tony Maglione, who is the producer and was sort of the mastermind of all of the recording and the sessions, and had one of the hardest jobs in this process, and not only was enthusiastic about it, but believed in it from the very beginning. So, Tony, welcome.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late. My wife and I are actually putting an offer in on a house today. So, like, we've been signing paperwork for.
Congrats.
Well, yeah, because you have to move at the speed of light these days. So
that's crazy.
So sorry. I am sorry I'm late.
No worries. No worries at all. Any other singers have any thoughts on sort of the process and how, from start to finish here?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think having done a lot of recording work with choirs in the past, this was definitely a unique experience, and not having done the piece when they did it a few years ago and jumping in during a pandemic in a recording studio, I think the whole thing was kind of crazy. But the experience and looking through the music and getting to hear, what the possibilities were, and thinking about that as an NFT and having all those layers, I think the piece really did lend itself well towards this environment. So I think it was just a really interesting project, I think, for all of us to jump in and be able to be a part of.
I'm actually curious to know, because if I'm not mistaken, Sam, you proposed this for Verdigris, right? So I'm curious to know, like, when Sam proposed it initially, like, what were your first thoughts? Like, were you like, what are you even talking about? Or like, what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, you had to kind of step back for a second and kind of take it all in. And, and I was familiar with blockchain because I work in technology, and I think parts of it, I think, were, I was familiar with, but I think it was definitely something you had to really dive into and think about. And I think once you got your head wrapped around what it actually was, and then looking at what the piece entailed and all the different pieces, and you start to think, wow, this could really be something that's really cool and really innovative. And so I think that part of it, and being kind of the first ones on the scene in this space was really exciting.
And I'll jump in there too. In some ways, I guess when I first started singing with Verdigris, I began to be surprised, and I'm used to it by now. sometimes I'll have a conversation with Sam and he's like, okay, there's this new idea and I'm going to try to describe it, but it's never been done before. So it's going to be impossible to describe. So, I mean, that's one of the things that's so enjoyable about being part of the group is that you really never know what's going to come next. So that's exciting.
Man, that's great high praise in my opinion, from you, Meredith. That's awesome. The piece started with me actually like reaching out to Nick. I had heard Nick's music, so actually this is very interesting. Tony is a professor at William Jewell. He's the director of choral activities at William Jewell College in Missouri, and he had just released an album of his students singing, and on that album was Nick Reeves, one of his pieces, and I was like so enamored by his music. And I like reached out to him and I started having a conversation, and I really wanted to like find a way to work together, and I sort of pitched him the idea of Betty's Notebook. And from my perspective, it seemed like Nick was very interested. Nick may have a different perspective on this, but I had at this point just read about Betty's Notebook, and it was like totally like enamoring to me, and so interesting and so mysterious. It was like this it was just like a no-brainer. So I pitched it to Nick, and Nick's response was like, all right, let's do it. And basically like the rest is history. Nick, I wonder, I'm actually like kind of curious to hear your perspective on this from the beginning.
Well, Sam already set up how we two met. It was completely online, even though years before that I actually lectured at Westminster Choir College, and Sam was in the audience when I lectured, and it was about the music of Arvo Pärt. And then years later, he comes to hear a recording that Tony recorded with his choir. It's a composition I wrote. He listened to it, and he really was digging deep into it. And Tony described it, sort of like an American Arvo Pärt sound. So Sam thought, all right, let's go in this direction, grays and different shades of black. And we're going to have sort of, still shots of pigeons and a deer crying in the background. This is what Betty's Notebook is going to be. And then once I started listening to the interviews of Betty's Notebook and I saw the source material, the piece just fell into place where it became a narrative. It was a story. We're telling this dramatic recount of this woman's experience that she had, and how can you capture such a frenetic, chaotic event from someone who has such an impressionable mind at that moment, being a 15-year-old. And so I said, Sam, we're going to write a piece, but Betty is the piece. And what I mean by that, Betty's voice is used in the composition. Betty's voice is then manipulated to sound like a choir. Betty's voice is then analyzed so that her overtones are going to be the overtones the choir is singing. So Betty is the composition. Betty Klink's voice is imbued in so many different aspects of the piece. And then to create a deeper sense of that time period, I looked into acquiring the rights of the songs that she wrote down in her notebook. Her notebook has lyrics to like George Gershwin songs, etc. You can look at them. I've analyzed all those songs and saw that, 1937, these were on your hit parade. There's vinyl of every single song that she had, including the alternate lyrics. She was listening to specific recordings, and I could tell, oh, it was this vinyl record as opposed to that one. And after you do all the research and you want to put that on into a recording, it's just too cost prohibitive. And so I suggested, why don't I write songs in the style of that time, so we can create that atmosphere of 1937. And what you get is an aesthetic interpretation of what it could have been like for this young woman at this point in history. And every time I go back and listen to that, I find more and more that we are entering into somewhat that liminal state in between the subconscious and what is happening right in front of you with Betty's Notebook. I don't know if that's what Sam was expecting to get. And at that premiere in Dallas in 2019, I think we saw a glimmer of the piece, but because of the parameters of COVID and the restrictions, it forced us to do a studio recording. And then in that process, each time we put down a track, we put it together, and then a new track came on, and then another layer, and then another layer, and then another layer. And then right before we released it to async, I felt that the team saw it come together, and then they felt, what is this? What has just happened here? And that's Betty's Notebook. Betty's Notebook is a stream of consciousness of so many things coming together. So that was my perspective. I first wanted to write a piece on child labor, and coincidentally, Verdigris was performing that year a piece by Julia Wolf that dealt with child labor in the coal mines. So Sam said, why don't we go into this realm? And I looked at this material. I said, I have all the material I need.
So cool. And
Very
that's
cool.
that makes a lot of sense, actually. I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that background.
Thank you.
Tony, do you have any additional thoughts? Like, what did you think when Sam kind of suggested this? And yeah,
that's a good question. So Sam called me, I guess it was December, and said, I want to do a recording. And I said, okay, when? Well, I'm thinking June, July, whatever. He says February. He's like, I want to get this thing out, like. And my immediate thought was, there's no way. There's no way we're going to have the time to record it. There's no way we're going to have the time to edit it. And then I had to, audit a course just to get through Nick's explanation of the entire piece. I took notes. There were 3 exams. I had to write a term paper. It was ridiculous. And so once I finally understood the piece, I think we had a second conversation, and we were like, we need a recording engineer that has done pop music. Because the traditional classical choral aesthetic isn't going to work, for COVID restrictions. We need to have a little bit more control over where people are, when people are in the space, and how we're capturing the sound. And then because we knew we were going to have to wear masks, we knew we'd have to do some work in the post process. So that was just thinking about the design of that was a challenge. But I drove down to Dallas the night before we started recording, and I met with Trey, and he walked me through the setup, and I explained to him what I was going to be listening for. And I think at first we started off with a couple just sort of bumps, not understanding quite what each other was getting at. But then eventually we came to sort of an unspoken agreement on how we were going to capture this, how we were going to manipulate it when it was all done. And so then we spent hours making individual voices sound like a choral aesthetic without making it sound processed. And so that was painstaking. Every measure, we had to adjust some sort of level to make it sound authentic. In a way that you wouldn't have to do if the mics were, if you had 12 mics and they were, 12 feet up in the air or 13 feet up in the air and 8 feet back from the choir, and then back further from that. So you had space and the room like a normal classical recording, because these were right up on their mouths. So this was a completely different experience than any other classical recording I've ever had to do. And so that in that, and then thinking about all the layers and how we were going to have to get all of them to line up and be able to work with one another, given any iteration, so it sounds good with every. And so it was a real challenge. And so we just kept joking about how big Nick's brain must be throughout the process. We kept it light, but we had a really, really good time. And the process was hard, but it was really rewarding.
Just for the record, that is why I shave my head. I was a prescription by the doctor because of the enormity of the capacity. So just so everyone could know, I want that to be the reason why I shave my head.
This is why I work with these people. Because they're so lighthearted and they're easy to work with.
That is hilarious, and it's super interesting to learn about this. We had me, Sam, and Bryan had an initial conversation about Betty's, I can't remember, like it must be like a month ago or more. Time goes by so quickly, but and you know, that they explained all of the process, and like we went through like the whole layers and really like the story, and it's like it's just so interesting to see how like there's kind of three things that like or more, I guess. It's like one side is like technology and like programmable music, then the other side is like classical music, then there's art, and then there's actually like a real life story. So like all of these things kind of coming together in one masterpiece, and that's, you know, it's incredible. Like it's the first time it's happened, so you know, it's yeah, it's great. I think I have no other words, to be honest.
One thing I would like to comment on what you were saying about all these things coming together. It was so organic. Meeting with Brian showed me sketches of the artwork, and this is something that we don't talk about a lot when it comes to the music side, but this is very important because there's a saying that I don't know if I've created it or I heard it from somebody else. Scores get better with age. Meaning, when Beethoven symphonies were premiered, orchestras have put in the proper markings, the bowings, and everything to make that piece sound so perfect. And I think this process of Betty's Notebook has gotten better with time, with age, if you will. And it keeps revealing itself. One of the aspects is the art of Brian. Brian's sketches were, you know, to be frank, they weren't as clear yet because they were sketches. Once Brian sat down with us and started to figure out what we're going for, he got it immediately. I don't know if, Brian, you can put up a picture here, but the dial on Betty's radio, so that's a detail that I noticed, where the dial had that Art Deco aesthetic where it was made to look like it was done by hand, but you could tell it was also mass produced. The style of the woman that's behind Brian, the airplane, everything. Brian, go ahead. You're going to interject.
Oh, I don't know if I can share.
That's
Like
okay.
you can see the dial at the bottom of the screen, but I'll see if I can pull up some example images while you're talking.
And one of the things that helped me do as a composer, that helped me to figure out not only is the team locking in together, but this is going to be the surface of the piece. I have to always remember that. This is one of the first things people see before they ever hear a single note, and it's so important. And what it shows is not only does Brian get the concept, it shows that the concept itself can be comprehensible. Other people can get it too. You see a notebook, you see handwriting, beautiful handwriting, by the way. You see these glamorous doodlings of sort of like a Fred Astaire or you know, Ginger Rogers or that type of face. You see the airplane, you see the dial, and all of these different aspects set up the stage so well that you know you're going back in time somewhere. But because of the color scheme, because of the juxtapositions of a mouth with dotted lines and handwriting in a radio, you really don't know what to expect. So there's this great balance there. When it comes to bringing together Tony's aspects, Tony's talent, I was not in Dallas for the recording session. I don't think people understand that. I was at my house, thousands of miles away, and that almost was a better way to do it because then I let them take over and interpret the piece. And they brought out things in the piece that I wasn't thinking about, and they saw different angles, and it made the piece better. Trey Nagel is another person we need to talk about. He has Luminous Studios, Luminous Sound in Dallas. He was the sound engineer. And Trey's background with gospel, with pop, with metal, some orchestral, helped him to think in a different way and us to think in a different way. And everyone agreed that we've never done anything like this before. So we were all bringing out the best qualities of each other by complementing what the other person could do and also what the other person couldn't do. And so Sam there is holding all of this in tandem with all of these different talents in there in the booth, not just as an organizer, but also as an artist, trying to make this all gel. But to be honest with you, it gelled so organically. And it's kind of remarkable that this is the first project.
Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about the art and sort of the background of what you're thinking here?
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to the beginning, you guys kind of pitched me this music and this idea. And like Nicholas said, it was organic, but I also, Nicholas created what I would describe as like in the TV show Homeland, where there's like a crime solver with all these pins and pictures and clues, and he has this wall with all these ideas, and that's how he creates, and that's how his brain works, and it's incredible. And so it took me a bit of time to kind of wrap my mind around the density of this piece, because every single moment is purposeful. And so I wanted to make sure that I created something that each thing also had its purpose. And so the bigger idea around my piece is the storytelling of Betty's experience. And so I created this overall vibe and aesthetic of a 1930s radio, Art Deco. And then I tried to visualize her notebook in a way that brought in my styles as well as what she had created and wrote down, in a way that put us in her body at the time experiencing this moment. Because I really got into this idea of, as artists or anybody, we're all yelling into the void hoping someone hears us. And I sympathized with both Amelia Earhart in this moment and also Betty in her entire life, hearing these voices calling out and hoping people hear them. And so in my mind, there's a linear timeline of Amelia being heard by Betty, Betty being heard by Verdigris, and other, and the Tygar, and then us and Async taking the story another step, and then what will come after today, which is it goes into the hands of another collector who will then continue that story even further. And so I really got excited about this idea of storytelling, which Nicholas was doing early on with this piece, which it tells a linear kind of timeline story, but it's also an experience. And so, yeah, so my piece breaks down into a bunch of different layers, whether I guess I can point like, words that I found impactful in what was in the notebook: send us help, I need air, things that really resonated as emotionally important passages. Taking drawings that she was making at the time and kind of reinterpreting them and using them as a way of telling a story, which you can kind of see all the lines come from the mouth, and you can see the path that it takes to kind of show the idea of storytelling, but also what happened with Amelia. It's, this is Betty's narrative of what she believed she heard or what happened. And so that's all storytelling based on what Betty believed or heard or told. And so I think those are the key ideas around it. And you see the radio dials change to show people still searching, because it's an outcome that has not been solved yet. And so all these ideas kind of swirled around, and it was like, how can I take this dense idea and kind of distill it into a visual that's both appealing and informative towards the story and kind of elevates the story? Because as we were creating this, we were thinking, how will this be digested? It's a 20-minute long piece. It's an experience. It's a challenging piece of music that you have to give your time and energy and mind to understand. And so we kept thinking, well, this is something that you would put into a physical piece in a room, and you would stand in that room and you'd experience it. And so this all ties into this idea of a physical radio, programmable, that changes the storytelling from day to day, but something that, isn't necessarily something you'd like flip on Spotify and listen to. This is an experience that we wanted people to have, similar to what it was originally when it was heard in an auditorium. And so, all these kind of ideas and concepts swirled around, and that's how it ended up being what it is now, if that makes sense.
That's amazing. And it's yeah, it actually it's really is, the experience part is it's so true. And I guess something that I would like, maybe Sam, that you could speak about more, is like the programmability side to it, and what that adds as well to the story of Betty and to this piece as a whole, and how it feels like it kind of like came really naturally, that it was like programmable as such, for it to be able to be changed and for all of the different kind of layers to be added as part of the story. But yeah, like talk about it more.
Yeah, so I think in general, like if I were to summarize this piece in like a sentence or so, what we want to do with our viewers is we want to put them in the same shoes that Betty was in when she heard these distress calls in 1937. So essentially what we do is we have people, it's almost like people are sitting in front of a shortwave radio trying to turn a tuning knob to hear like clearly Amelia Earhart's distress calls, but are constantly like obstructed. Like her distress calls are obstructed by all sorts of different interferences. And from that perspective, like, we wanted to create this soundscape, and it's a dense soundscape. I mean, it has like four unique parts that all are. So you have to like understand like the background of each part in order to understand, or to like really comprehend the entire piece. And the way that we went about that was through the programmability aspect. So actually, like the programmability aspect of Betty's Notebook is designed to make audiences want to be like it literally puts audiences inside of the music. Like they're not outsiders, they're not sitting in a concert hall in seats and then you have the orchestra on the stage. Audiences, through the programmability of this, are actually on stage with the musicians, sort of sitting with them in the same chair or standing right next to them, to their right or to their left, because they get to see sort of the changes and the little intricate details that come in and out. And so from that perspective, like on a high level, what Betty's Notebook does, and what the programmability of Betty's Notebook does, is it allows audiences to deconstruct and reconstruct and customize what that experience was. And as a result, they almost become detectives, right? It's almost like that game Myst in the early 2000s that came out, like the one where you're like standing, or where you have to click around like certain objects and then you get to read descriptions and all that stuff. Like you're literally going through a soundscape, and you're literally going through a game of trying to figure out a holistic scenario and a holistic story that Betty was talking about for like her entire life, and that her family still continues to talk about to this day. And so from that perspective, I think like the story, it's game. It's a game. It's a mystery. It's something that we have to figure out, and yet it's also something that is true. It's historical. Like it actually happened. And so, like we read about these like internet sleuths that help solve mysteries all the time, and what we're essentially providing is like not just something that is cultural, but something that like really legitimately provides clues in the mystery of Amelia Earhart and in this whole story that is Betty Clank. And so, like, just to go into it just very quickly, there are four main layers here. There's the choir, which, Keith, Meredith, Jason, and 12 other members sang, which represent Amelia Earhart and her distress calls. So they sing what's written in Betty's Notebook, essentially. Yes, thanks for pulling that up. So the choir is tethered to Bryan's notebook. And the words that are written within that notebook, and also the dial. So the person who controls the choir gets to control how the choir ultimately sounds. Do they sound like they're in a recording studio? Do they sound like they're in a concert hall? Do they sound? Is it directional sound? And actually, this is somewhat of the genius. It's actually all the genius of Tony and what's it called? Trey, thank you. That actually, like, there are moments where you hear things in your left and right ear and so on and so forth. Like there's a moment where Amelia Earhart says, help, I need air, and then Trey actually creates this like directional sound where like you hear the sound, the word air, in your left and right ear, and it like goes faster and faster and faster to like simulate this like distress that's happening in the moment. And it creates like sort of this like really interesting like angle and 3D-ness of the whole thing. Then the second stem of this, the second part of this, is it's Betty's voice. So Betty's voice is it's actually Betty in her older age talking about her experience. And the person who owns the voice, Betty's voice, actually gets to control the narrative, and she sort of focuses on different things. So sometimes, it's her general feelings on the piece. Sometimes it's a focus on what Amelia Earhart's distress was like, and as you can see, that's what's reflected in the artwork. And then sometimes it's Fred Noonan's perspective on everything. So Fred Noonan was little people don't really, they think they think of Amelia Earhart as flying across the Atlantic, but also it was Fred Noonan who was her navigator, and so he was actually on the journey with her when she disappeared, and Betty sort of talks about his perspective. The next part of this is Betty's choir, and Betty's choir is actually very interesting. On a surface level, Betty's choir sounds like the gentle whirring of an airplane or the whirring of a propeller. But on a deeper level, it is literally Betty's voice deconstructed. So certain pitches and certain music notes are plugged in to sort of symbolically represent Betty Clank not only talking about her experience, but singing with the choir, singing with Amelia Earhart. Like it's this belief that this was an actual true thing. And so the owner of Betty's choir gets to determine the general feeling that we give to the audience. So sometimes it's distress, sometimes it's reminiscence, and sometimes it's cries. And this layer, or the stem rather, is actually one of the most interesting, in my opinion. And Nick can sort of go into this afterwards if he chooses. But there are certain like little nuggets here that are like quite interesting. Sometimes you hear alarm bells in the background. Sometimes you hear, small things that Amelia was saying at a certain point, small little details that you come back, and after like spending, I would say at this point over 300 hours with this piece, like I still come back to it and I think, and I listen and hear new things. So Betty's choir is a very interesting part because it sort of gives little nuggets of gold, of mysterious things that represent what that feeling is. And then finally, Betty's choir, or Betty's radio. It's very interesting. So little do people know that in addition to recording Betty's notebook, we also recorded 5 different jazz standards that went along. And if for those watching right now who were in our live stream, actually got to witness and hear 2 of them. And so what we did was we actually we recorded 5 different jazz standards and then put them through a 30s filter as if you're hearing it through a 30s radio, that kind of way. And then on top of that, what they do is they come in and out through white noise. So it's as if we're turning that tuning knob from an audience perspective, and we're hearing different jazz standards come in and out. And there are several, Keith actually was one of the soloists that you'll hear on this initial recording if you click on it right now and listen to it. And several of the other singers were sort of a part of that process as well. So that's a basic overview of what we're talking about here. And I'm happy to have Nick or Bryan sort of elaborate on the artistic aspects of this as well.
In fact, Bryan, I'll say some things, but just jump on in. There's no need to stand on ceremony here. If you can go back to the Betty's choir layer, and just click on that, or whoever was clicking on that.
One sec.
Oh, thank you. One of the things that I mention to many people when we talk about this, and sometimes the point, I don't know if it comes across or they realize what this really means, is that the human voice is the only instrument here. And every time I say that, you sort of see these glazed looks over people's faces, or they don't really understand what I mean by that. I mean exactly what I said. Besides a few things that create the atmosphere of a radio, every single pitch in this piece, or manipulation of this piece, or any pitch, is all a manipulation of the human voice. So Sam talked about alarm bells and this and that you hear. If you look at Betty's choir and you go to distress, that layer, I chose filters that simulated an old SOS that you would have used an old Morse code telegraph sound. When you go to the layer for cry, I took the human voice and I changed it so that over time the voice would change from pitch to percussion, so that the piece would actually have some type of percussive aspect. It sounds like mechanical drums at a certain point. Reminisce is the story itself, and distress and cry, the SOS perspective and cry, that perspective, they add a different hue to that reminisce. Distress adds the perspective of Amelia Earhart trying to get the message out, trying to send that signal to the world that they are stranded here. It doesn't really convey that Amelia Earhart was a more composed person than Fred Noonan, but Fred Noonan had an injury, so he was probably distraught at that moment. Amelia Earhart was probably just as distraught. Cry is more from Fred's perspective, where it's more of anguish and turmoil being expressed at once in the middle of a distress call. Amelia's distress is richer with overtones and high and low sounds, where Fred is raw. It's sparser. It's just using the human voice to create percussion, so it leaves the room open more like a plain. I see cry more like a desert, because the ocean is so similar to the desert. You're dehydrated, you're under the sun, it's monotonous, you don't know what's going to happen. So each different layer has a different meaning or feel. If you go back to the first layer, not Betty's choir, just go to the live choir. The choir. This was a far simpler process. This has less to do with characterization, has more to do with venue. The first layer makes you feel like, variant, makes you feel like you're in a studio. The second one makes you feel like you're in a concert hall, like you would have heard in maybe 2019 if you're in Dallas. And the third one is to make it sound like you're walking through a sound installation in a very reverberant stone museum space. Let's say you're at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This piece is installed there, and you hear sound coming from different directions. If you go to another variant there, layer, that is, which is, let's see, Betty's voice. Betty's voice is interesting because those are more of the clues. Klink's interpretation is the story through. Earhart's struggle has bits and pieces that are in the notebook that are probably voiced by Amelia Earhart that you don't hear in any other variant. And they have a certain radio sound going in and out, left and right, and it sounds like there's a lot of static added to it. Noonan's mindset is more of a psychological distress. And the last thing is the radio. And I really want to hear what Bryan has to say about this, because the radio really takes on its own life, where you have Betty's voice, Betty's choir, and you have the live choir, which are all Betty's story. But the radio is sort of that second character, where we're hearing a little bit of the 1930s with jazz. And so in this iteration, you hear those jazz pieces I wrote in the style of that Cole Porter, George Gershwin world, but they're put in different orders, so it sounds like you have a different radio broadcast happening. It's like you're in three different versions of the same universe. You know, on this day, we heard this combination. What if you heard this combination of jazz pieces? What if you heard this combination of jazz pieces? And so I think, in essence, the radio becomes a character. And I want Bryan to speak about that in terms of art direction, where the radio becomes sort of our storyteller.
Yeah. So, well, with this project, it has gone through changes, and we had to kind of readjust how the radio is laid out. You can see how, the radio is built around a few ideas, whether it's the album art or the remix code in the corner. It's all built around those ideas to kind of still feel like, even though there's this like current async code in there, it still kind of feels like it's a part of this radio build. And so, yeah, you can kind of see how each of these is a little different. They all have different Art Deco inspired speaker grills on them that have different Art Deco designs to them. And then if you look at the tuning dials, they're actually little airplane propellers to kind of hint at Amelia And so it's a fun way of getting different wood grains and different vibes that, you know, each feel like their own kind of 1930s radio, but still live within this same world. And so that was kind of the fun way of, you know, figuring out how to organize all this information in a way that still feels like a radio and doesn't take too much away from the main story of what's happening inside the radio. And maybe I can show a close-up of the fun radio dial.
Just
There you
to just to add as well, you have all got new bids on the layers, actually.
Oh, wonderful.
Whilst we were speaking. So the choir for 4.5 ETH. Sam always makes fun of me because I'm in the UK. We say Ethereum, so he makes fun of me. Anyways, and all of the layers have just got all new bids for 4.5 ETH, which is amazing.
Amazing.
And
awesome.
And we're 3 minutes away from the first
Oh, wow.
layer closing,
soon.
right?
Yeah.
So soon.
Yeah. There you go. There's some example. Like that's more of a close-up of what those Art Deco girls were, which I'm always a big fan of, kind of Art Deco patterns. So it was fun to dive into that. And with that first slide Nick was talking about, you could see the dotted lines kind of trapping the plane, and that was kind of to symbolize the storytelling holding on to the memory of Amelia. And you can see that there's kind of 3 generations of the plane represented. There's a black and white photography style one. There's kind of a, you know, 1990s illustrated one that kind of represents when Betty was telling the story. And then there's a current 3D one that kind of shows the art style of now, to kind of give this like generational storytelling to it. So if you look over my shoulder,
Amazing.
it's the old one. But yeah, so it was really fun to kind of dive in and dissect and figure out the best way to effectively do the storytelling.
Amazing. So good to hear from, you know, from Verdigris as well, because the last time I obviously heard from you, Bryan, and from Sam, but you know, the team is a big part of this. So it's really interesting to hear how you found this experience as well, and the whole project. I mean, it's incredible. I've told Sam this numerous times. So yeah, congratulations to all of you. Such an amazing project.
To the choir, to the singers who had not only to sing with masks, but they had to sing in the most unusual way a choral singer has to sing. They had to, Tony described the whole process, the layup, the setup. I just want to express to them from the bottom of my heart how much it means for me as someone who sung in choirs my whole life, for you to take a piece that is really a jump off the deep end and just to go for it and just to trust that it's all going to work out. And it meant a lot to me. And thank you for the results. There's more than one beautiful moment in these recordings, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, can I jump on that, Nick, and just say again for the singers, it was outstanding work. Like what they were able to do and capture in that very short amount of time in the studio, how flexible they were to be able to just change the way they sounded so that they could sound like a 1930s style Cole Porter sound, and they could also then go back to the stark whatever Nick's verbiage is for what the style of music is he's writing, but that stark modern choral aesthetic. It was pretty amazing to just be able to speak to them and for them to just switch gears and make those sounds, so that the real challenge in the editing process wasn't fixing them necessarily. It was making it sound the way it needed to sound, and they gave us most of the tools to get there.
Well, and I could speak to that, Tony, at least on the treble side of things, the sopranos and altos and countertenors. I wasn't in the room when the basses and tenors were recording, of course, because we recorded different days, different hours, things like that. But for the treble side of things, it was one of those very rare kind of, I like to call it the magical unicorn kind of events where we all felt very connected. And, you know, some of us had not been singing for a long time together. Some of those singers were brand new to Verdigris, but we gelled in a way that made it feel like we were standing next to each other in a very reverberant hall, and we felt that experience of gelling together. So that was really great, and the direction was really great from Sam and Tony. You know, that was a great recording. Why don't we try this? Why don't we completely switch gears and see, you know, here's a crazy idea. Why don't we do this sort of resonance rather than, you know, adding a lot of extra space to the sound, you know? So the process of trying to be creative together while also gelling at the same time was, I would say, probably a great memory experience that hopefully kind of comes across in those recordings as well. And as a teacher in the Texas public school system, as a choir teacher, we are talking about this all the time with our students of, hey, choir is not all about just singing. It's about working with other people. It's about that cross-curricular experience that you can have. And unfortunately, that isn't very common right now. You know, we want to inspire that, but now it's really great to have a piece to say, hey, look, this is happening. It's something you can do. If you're an artist like Bryan, if you are a sound engineer, if you're a singer, like all these things can come together, composing, creating new things. This is something that if this comes up with my students, I can talk about that and have something to show them that is inspiring and kind of accessible. So I think it's just a really fantastic project.
I want to talk about Tony. I want to talk about the man Keith right there. Keith, he looks all, you know, stoic right there. But Keith, don't be fooled. We gave Keith. We're talking about Betty's Notebook as this abstract art piece, but there's an aspect to it with the jazz pieces where they had to enter into that world of the singers of that day. And so we're talking about Judy Garland. We're talking about the young tenor, not baritone, Frank Sinatra. We're talking about people when MGM actually produced hit records in their movies, but also on the radios. And Keith, we said, Keith, here's your piece. This needs to sound like this era, blah, 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 blah. Do this, do that, do that. And Keith, you know, coming from a choral background, what we got was this really suave interpretation, almost like a Cole Porter song, you know, where it has sort of that clean, very clear, articulated sound, which you can hear in that day. There are a lot of classically trained singers back in the 1930s and 20s on those original phonographs, by the way. And so what was interesting is Keith heard models, but he still used his choral background and his own music experience to interpret the piece as Keith, but also it fits squarely into that time period. There's so many different hats people had to put on for this project. I don't know, Keith, if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, part of the challenge with recording this piece is there's nothing, even though Verdigris had performed it before, it's not the same piece that you can hear now, or, you know, as the layers change, as whoever owns the artwork, as it continues to change in, you know, in perpetuity, I guess. It's hard to understand the piece just in general until you hear it at the very end. And, you know, I remember when Nick sent me, or when Sam said, he contacted me in December when he was thinking about doing this project. And he said, hey, you know, I need you to do this solo, the ABCs of Love. And I looked at it and I immediately had a panic attack because it's just totally not my style. It's just, you know, I'm a classically trained choral singer, and it just took a lot of playing around And I think it's just really a testament to, Nick, you sent me those emails and videos to watch, and I'm watching. I'm like, okay, I could do it. And I'm sending you videos of me singing, trying to find the right sound for it, and just being a little unsure of what it really took. And I think a lot of it goes, a lot of the credit goes to Tony and Trey and Sam. Sitting in that studio for an hour and a half and just really getting the sound, and then coming back to it at the end of the recording project and just making those final touches. It was such a, with recording projects, especially in the classical choral world, it's take after take after take after take, just trying to get it absolutely perfect. And in this environment, it was more of a creative process. It was, I felt like an artist, an actual artist, not somebody who's just regurgitating this music in the most prim and proper way. It really felt like we were creating music and art.
Keith,
So
I just want to say that you are a trooper, because there were times where I was like, can that vowel be a little bit, can that be an A, and he did everything I asked him to do. And we eventually captured exactly what we were looking for. It just took some playing to get there.
Yeah, it felt like I was in college doing a voice lesson again. But it was great fun. I loved doing it.
I don't want to interrupt you at all. I'm just wanting to update you all, since we are coming close to the endings of the auctions for some of the layers. So the first layer, which is the choir, has just received a new bid and has now been extended for another 5 minutes. So the new bid is at 5.5 ETH. And so everything else has obviously shifted to another additional.
The choir. World, take note of this. For people using their voices.
That's right.
It's being valued as high art because it is high art. And it shows that art started centuries ago being written down for the voice. And I think it is amazingly.
Okay, so
go ahead. Interject.
Wait, it's actually, so the choir layer has been sold for 19,094 to buyer, who is Veritas Kami, who is part of the Metaverse team. So congrats.
Yay!
First of the layer. That's amazing.
So going back,
and we have also HMLTD saying good luck and sending good vibes from London. So hi, HMLTD.
Very nice,
HMLTD.
HMLTD. Hey, and congratulations on his sale with with the entire band. That was amazing.
Yeah, their piece is incredible. If anybody's watching this, they should go check their work out as well, because their piece is phenomenal.
Absolutely, 100%.
Absolutely.
And let me just say that piece has 6,500 different iterations or unique ways to listen to it. It's unfreaking believable.
They set the bar really high.
We thought we were doing something complicated and amazing, and they totally outshined us in their interpretations. Amazing. Thank you, HMLTD.
So Betty's Voice STEM auction will be ending at 12:13 PST, which is 3:13 for you guys Eastern time, if I'm not mistaken. Sam, correct me if I'm wrong. So it's in 3 minutes, almost 3 minutes. Well, 3.5, let's say. But yeah, sorry.
Oh,
I don't want to interrupt you.
So
just updating you on this is my first kind of live auction, so I feel pretty excited, to be honest. I've never done this.
Yeah.
But
I should have the
Yes, the gavel or whatever it's called.
Sam, are you there?
Yeah. I'm here. Sorry, I'm distracted. I'm just trying to keep up with all of this. It's crazy.
I'm glad that we don't have to do the closing of it manually.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I'd be so stressed.
That would be so stressful. Yes, absolutely.
Hey, I wanted to say before I don't get a chance to talk to you again, Bryan, your artwork is incredible.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
after living with the sound for like 2.5 months or whatever, just like sound to actually get to see what you created based on this idea and how much it just sort of interlinks with the both the aesthetic that Art Deco aesthetic plus also the it's just fantastic.
Well,
It's
thank you
just
so
fantastic.
much.
The
And
modernist, and that's great.
the praise is mutual. I mean, I think a lot of people, I mean, I've been in a fortunate position to have seen async and understand like the dynamics and the concepts around how to create for it. But what you had to figure out was a whole new way of creating music essentially. And so I think, you and HMLTD and the other launch people are all laying the groundwork for how musicians will think about how they create music going forward. And I think that's, I think it's groundbreaking in many, many ways.
New bid for Maximo and X for 5 each on Betty's voice.
Amazing. Wow. This is crazy.
So it might be extended again, I think. Let's
It looks like it, yeah.
another 5 minutes, yeah.
All right, do we need Nick? I hear you can do an auctioneer's that really
Yeah.
battery.
Yes.
Do that.
I need to hear
you start
this.
that at this point, or
Yeah,
I'm lying.
Exactly. In
But
fact, it's one of the layers, so I'm not going to do it now. But if it's for 10 Ethereum, I have an auctioneer voice embedded. You just have to find where it is.
It's like an Easter egg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicholas, do you think going forward you will start to think about creating music programmably from the start? I mean, because this one you'd created it as a piece first, and then you kind of ported it in a way into this space. Do you think if you were to go about creating music from the ground up, would you change anything, or would you see new ideas?
Great question. Thankfully, this piece worked so well with programmable music. And so when Sam had the idea of using this in the COVID era as a programmable piece, he says, I think this is what this piece is. And I thought, yeah, this could be the ultimate realization. So that was a bit of a coincidence.
New bid, guys. Sorry, keep
ahead.
interrupting you, but I'm just
No,
for Betty's voice, Veritas, so MetaPurse just bid for $21,000, which is, I think it's 5.5 each.
Amazing. Yes.
That's great news. If things like
Great
this keep
news.
happening, if there's interest in music to be presented this way, and there's an audience for it, just like the music video in the 1980s influenced the way artists started to record their albums, and they started to think of the music video as a viable vehicle to transport their music, to show their music. Yes, I would absolutely do that. And what I would start to do is I would think about multiple perspectives, something that is really hard to convey in a concert hall, but to show music from multiple perspectives, multiple angles. For instance, people think that Ravel shows the object, but Debussy's music is the object. Ravel is the observer, where Debussy's music is that which is observed. What if you had a piece where you had both? What if you had a composition that was both objective and subjective in those terms of perspective? So to answer your question, Brian, absolutely. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. I think it opens up a lot of possibilities. I mean, you think about I read about how like Metallica, when they went on tour recently, they looked at what their top Spotify plays were, and they've built their set list around what they saw their fans listening to the most. I think this could influence artists in a way that they can see and their community's feedback on which versions of these songs they want to hear,
I think what's cool about this project is that there really is kind of something for everyone. There's a visual aspect there. It just depends on how deep you want to dive into it. Like Nicholas was saying earlier, or Tony, I think it was, like, I had to take a course on this piece. There's the historical element, but there's also how it was built and Nicholas's mindset of how he built it. But then, how it came to pass, and then you add Bryan's artwork on top of it. And so you can really just sit down and experience if you want to, but you can also kind of go down the rabbit hole, which is what a lot of us want these days. We want something that we really feel like we know a lot about and can talk about it.
Yeah, I think, my experience in the crypto art world is that the stories behind the art give it a level of value, just because when people go, hey, I bought this piece of art, they want to tell you something about that art more than just you looking at it. They want to tell you about the artist. They want to tell you about the backstory or the meaning. And so I think, storytelling is so important in this space.
New bid, guys. New bid just came in from Maximo NX for 6 ETH, which is $22,000 and 913.
Wow.
So
Holy
it
moly.
must have.
Maximo.
Nice.
Thank you, Maximo and
So
X.
Excellent.
yeah, it's probably extended to another 5 minutes. So I'm guessing 321, I think. No,
All
not
right.
321. Sorry.
All right, people, let's go. Let's get these bids rolling in.
Veritas Comedy's like Maximo.
Tony's got a house to buy, you guys.
Yeah. Honestly, Betty's voice is one of the most interesting parts of this this whole piece for me, because I'm fascinated by the story. I'm fascinated by hearing the little extra snippets of text from her interview, how that gets interwoven into the overall drama of this 20-minute piece. It's so cool.
Veritas said, "Take that, Maximo."
Now, speaking of Betty,
So yeah, we have a new a new bid from Veritas. So Maximo and Veritas are on a very, very close bidding war. So the new bid is
Maximo
for
has the
26.
word Veritas in Latin. He's like, no, he's gonna bid. Come on, Maximo.
And the truth shall set you free.
By the way, Veritas actually just DM'd me on Twitter to tell you, Tony. He said, "Hodl, don't buy a house." LOL. Which for non-crypto people, hodl means hold, except with a D in front of the L. Some people abbreviate it to hold on for dear life. But hodl,
I think he's got a good point.
He does have a good point. Yeah.
Tell him, look at my last name. I know a guy.
Yes.
Tony, Nicole is Italian, right?
Yeah, I am.
You're muted.
And he understands.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
When I saw your surname, I thought, okay.
Oh my god. Very, very cool.
Oh, so Nicholas, I'm having a random memory moment in relation to Betty. Wasn't there another person the first time we performed this piece? There was another person at that after party that was like, it was a panel where you were talking and someone else was talking that had a lot to do with Betty's Notebook. Can you remind me of who that was and what they were part of with the project?
There was Rick Gillespie was there from Tigar, the foundation. If that
was the one. I just couldn't remember his.
Too. Rick Gillespie is a person who provided us the source material. He interviewed Betty Klink in the year 2000, and he's the one who's championed her story. It's a story that was being dismissed for decades, from 1937 all the way through the end of the 20th century. Rick Gillespie uses this and backs it up with certain historical references to the text, which is something we need to talk about more. Yes, it's an interesting piece, but there's some basis that this actually was a real transmission and not a hoax. Amelia Earhart's middle name was Mary, and you hear that. Her married name was Putnam. You hear that. You hear about getting a suitcase, which was so specific. Amelia Earhart said, tell my husband George to get the suitcase out of the closet in California. that would be really hard to make up. And all that information was due to Rick Gillespie's work with his foundation.
I
Yeah.
will say
Yeah.
Rick Gillespie deserves a lot of sort of credit in all this, because he was one of the first to really take a look at, really take a look at the notebook itself, and really like deep dive into it and notice sort of these discrepancies per se. And from that perspective, yeah, he has been so gracious in this process and allowing us to use the text of Betty's notebook, and sort of giving us, I've called him several times, and one time I called him and I was like, Rick, so what's your official opinion on like Betty's notebook? And he's like, of course I believe it, like there's no question that she heard all this different stuff. And he has all of these like great ideas, and great like he literally like flew to the island where supposedly Betty's or Amelia Earhart crash landed. He's found several like pieces of artifacts that point to the actual plane. He's done this like intense research, and really that's what his nonprofit Tiger really
Wow,
goes
guys,
after.
you have a real bidding war between Maximo and Veritas. So literally a minute ago, whilst you were speaking, Sam, Maximo bid for 26,732, and straight after Veritas came back with a $30,550 bid on Betty's choir.
Unfreaking believable. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
When we did a preview of this about a month ago, and Rick was a part of the listening party, and seeing his reaction was really pretty amazing. It felt emotional in a wonderful way.
Yeah, he was like talking about it, and I think he heard it, and he said something along the lines of like, I never. Whoa! I could hear myself.
What was that?
I don't know what that was. Oh my god!
I'm really freaked out by that because
Is that
it was
Veritas?
Nick. Oh my goodness. Anyway, he was like, I never thought that this was a thing. Like I never thought that this would be this powerful. And him listening to it really meant a lot from his perspective to say those words. So
I think Betty's voice is closed out. Am I correct?
it looks like it. Is that right, Nicole? Oh, maybe we're having some technical difficulty. I'm looking at a wow. Okay. So let's start with this. Betty's voice has sold to Veritas at $26,732. And then I see that there has been let's see, there has been a bid by Maximo on Betty's choir for $38,188, which is let me just check how much that is here. This is Betty's choir. Wow, this is 10 ETH by Maximo NX. 10 ETH. That's not a short chunk of change here.
For a one-woman choir. That sounds like many voices. Good job, Betty.
that's awesome.
Amazing.
Also, Veritas, way to go! Enjoy hearing the coordinates on one of those tracks. You get to listen in closely. Yeah, it's hidden in there. Good luck. Enjoy the mystery. Thanks for bidding.
Seriously,
I love that you added one of these.
Easter eggs.
My goodness. Amazing. Well, great, guys. This is great.
We're also distracted by.
I know we're so
numbers.
distracted by these numbers.
It's not good live television.
In other news, I apparently look like the Terminator on this.
You do. This
You
is
do.
when he's near being pressed by that machine in the warehouse.
Yeah.
Maybe
know-
that's where that crazy sound came from. It's really Sam
Oh.
Oh my god!
Sam's next piece is
the cyborg.
That's how he comes up with
Amazing.
these ideas. I knew it.
Now we know.
Because I
No,
come
I
from the future. Oh my goodness. Well, so let's talk a little bit about sort of like oh my goodness. And here we go, another bid. Sorry, this is just going to keep happening here, guys. We do have another bid by Veritas for 42,000 on Betty's Choir, and we're looking at 11 ETH. 11 ETH on Betty's Choir.
That's
currently.
amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. That's unbelievable. Hey, Nicole.
Hey, sorry guys, my laptop is doing
Oh,
some
cool.
weird things. Can you hear me?
Ooh,
Yeah.
Okay.
in a way.
We're
Wait,
gonna-
were you were the robot.
We're gonna
Yeah,
sample
I
that
think
and use
I
it for
was
the
a
next
robot.
project.
My laptop is kind of dying on me, so I had to connect from my phone. Obviously, like right on time when the auctions are ending. But yeah, all good.
Oh my goodness. No, it's all good. We're just talking. Veritas just put in another bid for Betty's Choir at 11 ETH currently. 11 ETH, which is amazing. Very amazing. And we were just remarking that I look like the Terminator. I'm gonna see if I can try and like turn off my camera and turn it back on because I don't know what's going on over here.
You know, what I'd like to know is from Jason, how does this project compare with some of the other recording projects you've done? Like, what are some of the main differences or different kinds of experiences here that are kind of new to what you've experienced?
Hold on. Before Jason answers this, can I just preface this by saying that Jason is like an amazing vocalist. Like all of our vocalists are really, really great. Jason flies all around the United States to, sing in several different ensembles. And we're like very lucky to have all of the choir members singing in Verdigris. And in that case, in this case, also really lucky to have Jason.
Oh, you're too much, Sam. Thanks. Appreciate it. I mean, most of the stuff that I've done from a recording standpoint has been kind of a choral setting. I think Nick kind of alluded to this earlier. You're in an environment where you're standing in a single room with, 16 to 30 or 40 different people, and one person screws up, and it's like, okay, got to do it again, and it's just over and over, and you're spending, days of 8-hour sessions just knocking it out. And I think this, where we were in a controlled environment in a studio with not even the whole group, it was just a couple of us at a time with sections, and we were with barriers in between us for pandemic measures. which made it even more interesting because you really can't listen across like you normally would in a choral setting. You really are listening. You got headphones on, and we're listening across to all the people sitting in a room with us, and then a recording of the trebles that happened the day before, or so it was a really unique situation that I definitely had not experienced in any other recording situation I've been in prior. I think all of my situations have always been, full ensemble. I mean, maybe I think I had one other situation where I might have recorded with a choir, a small ensemble, and an instrumental ensemble separately, but that was probably the closest to this. So yeah, that was a very unique situation. I would actually say, I would almost say I enjoyed it more. It was kind of an interesting situation to be able to have a lot of control over what was going on.
So you have a new bid on Betty's Choir from Maximo at 13 ETH. So it's been extended to 12.33 PST, which is 3.33. So another 3 minutes.
Wow.
There.
That's great.
Mason, what's your lowest note?
Oh gosh, depend. So doing Kargara, I can do an A. Normally, depending on the situation, I think in a normal choral situation, maybe a D. Which I've got some shoots coming up here pretty soon where we're singing it at Baroque pitch, and I think I've got some low D flats I've got to squeeze out, so it should be
Jason.
Betty's Notebook. You can hear some of those low notes, my friend.
Oh yeah, I bottom out 2 octaves above that.
Amazing. Wow. This is crazy. I think like this is so for many years since we've started doing work at Verdigris, I've always dreamed, like personally, like a personal dream of mine has always been to like make a difference and make people see, well, because like let's face the facts, like let's look at the classical music situation in the United States. Classical music situation in the United States is such that we have decreasing classical audiences every year. We have, a lot of classical musicians are relegated to sort of nonprofit work, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. Let me just say, I love doing nonprofit work and I love sort of doing this in the United States, but also like, it's something, it's a concern when you walk into a symphony or when you walk into a concert and you see people that are mostly like of older age, and you don't see young people like me or any of us in this chat right now. And this what this does is it shows that there's value, and not only value in classical music, but also value in new music. When I was starting Verdigris, I got lots of feedback that like, new music is hard to fund. New music is hard to make money off of. New music is, really difficult. But what I have actually found is the complete opposite. New music actually is a vehicle for new ways of connecting to communities. And in this case, like Betty's Notebook, there's so many communities that we're connecting to, so many bridges that we're building. And I think that like this being one of the first, or the first really, to do it is just like kind of a dream come true, and the beginning of a much larger journey for us as an organization to bring classical music and new music to larger audiences in the United States. So from that perspective, it's just like, it's so cool to see this happening in real time right now. It's just, it's humbling, it's amazing, and it makes me feel like the work that we've been doing for the last 3 years is important, and it's being recognized for the first time in a long time, especially for classical music.
It's 3:33. Let's see if it's gone to Maximo or not. It's 3:34 now, actually.
Looks like it just sold to Maximo NX. Nice.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Maximo.
And congratulations.
Congratulations, Maximo.
Maximo.
Sold for 13 ETH. Great.
Amazing.
Congrats.
So what do we have left here? We have Betty's Radio. And then we have the master.
Betty's Radio is the layer that I actually think is my favorite, because it has the soundscape, it has the sound of the radio and the distortion of that, and then it also has, on each layer has different jazz tunes that Nick so expertly crafted, and and those little chunks just appear, and it's really my favorite part of this whole piece.
Basileus is actually saying congrats in the comments. So I can see him commenting alive. So hi, Basileus, and thank you.
Thank you.
Can see it.
Let's see. Is it on the vertical crypto art? Where is
No,
it?
on if you just go on comments, you can. So I'm from my phone, so I
I
can.
see. I see.
He's saying hello to.
Oh, I see.
So
Yeah.
if you want to show, if you want, because I can't do it from my phone, but if you want to click show, you'll see that he's commenting and saying hello.
How do I show
We
it?
all say hi. Can you show the comments?
I don't think I can. Can
Okay.
any of you?
Yeah, it's to the right of the window.
To the right of the window. Yeah, I see it, but
See
I
it
can't.
now.
Yeah. Thank you, Basileus or Basilius. I'm not sure exactly the right pronunciation, but thank you. And Basileus actually has been
So
following Betty's Notebook quite a bit.
So new bid for Betty's radio from Maximo and X for 6 ETH, and the auction will end at 12:41 PST. So 41.
Brilliant. Wow.
There's so much drama here.
I know. I know.
Oh, new bid at 7 ETH. Bids came in at the same time from Veritas, so it will still close at 41 so far.
Come on, Veritas.
Amazing, amazing, amazing.
Basileus is saying to not get distracted. So yeah.
Stay on target. I agree with Tony. This. By the way, I feel like we're on QVC. Where's Joan Rivers? Let's talk about this product right here. This is great. But
Yep.
seriously, the radio, and out comes the radio on the catwalk posing. The radio, I think, is a wonderful aspect of the piece, just because it was a moment for the choir in the studio to shift gears. And anytime Tony and Sam said, "Oh, we needed a break," and the radio became the break, because instead of singing sort of in your art music voice, like Tony was describing, sort of that darker sound, they got to use a pop aesthetic from a very particular moment in history that is fun. And once everything started to click and ring and you hear the playback, it sort of gives you more energy in the studio, because then you could put at rest that side of your mind that was working on that hard art music. And then you get to the jazz music, which isn't easy, but it accesses a different side, I guess, of your sensibilities. And it comes through with the recordings. I don't know if anyone has any comments on that.
I can definitely comment on that, because I talk about this with my students all the time. And, you know, in teaching choir, lots of times we have to teach that more tall sound. And so lots of times they raise their hand and they say, you know, Ms. Tompkins, when can we use our real voice?
New bid. New bid at 8. Sorry for interrupting. New bid at 8 ETH from Maximo, and auction will end at 12:43. So free 43.
Yeah.
So Maximo's are definitely having a big bidding war there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so going back to the changing of techniques and that sort of thing, it was kind of a break to be able to switch gears a little bit and start thinking about how we can create a more 1920s, 1930s jazz kind of a sound. In fact, there's one jazz standard, and Nicholas, you may be able to help me on which one this one is, but there's this one technique there where he's written the singers have to create a sound that's like a cupped, muted trumpet.
I'm green.
I don't remember. I'm green when I'm blue. Right. So we had this whole conversation in the studio, like, okay, how are we going to make that sound? And I was just joking. I was the far back.
From Veritas, who's back with a 9.5 ETH bid, and the auction will end at 44 past.
Wow.
That's right, Veritas. You don't take that. No, but Meredith, that was a COVID issue, remember?
That, yes.
How you had mask on. How do you, because the piece has you cup like this, how do you do that with COVID? And so we had to come up with some kind of compromise. So I would, in the back of the room where I was standing, I was just kind of joking, but I was like, why not like, wah, 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 wah. We laughed about it, but that's ended up what we ended up using that style to create that sort of muted trumpet sound.
Oh, we got a
Yeah.
new bid, right?
Did we?
Yes. Maximo
From Maximo.
NX.
Can I?
Go ahead.
Let's see how much it is.
How much is the new bid for?
It just came in at
10.5.
10.5.
Oh,
10.5
wow.
ETH.
Wow. So
It's
it's
getting intense.
So let's talk about first of all, Bart McGeehan just wrote in the comments just a minute ago saying that I look like Vanna White. I don't think I look like Vanna White at all, but you know, if it floats your boat, Bart, we'll take it. So the other thing that I just want to mention, two anecdotal things. One is that exact piece that you're talking about, Meredith. If you remember, like, fun fact behind the scenes. Go ahead.
He's back with 11.5 ETH, and the auction is ending at 4:46 past the hour.
Wow, that's unfreaking believable. Unfreaking believable.
I feel like I'm getting
Amazing.
these announcements now.
So fun fact, you know, we had to actually retool the beginning of one of the pieces because we in to be extra safe about certain things. So we actually had to like recompose certain parts in real time. Yeah, Meredith is laughing right now. She thinks it's funny, and I kind of think it's funny too. But in the moment, it was so freaking stressful. Tony and I looked at each other when Nick called Tony, and we were like, we don't know how we're gonna get this done.
I remember that day.
So we literally re-recorded 2 bars, and that was it. That was it. And then we put it in place, and we're like, we're not touching this again. We're done. We're moving on.
Yeah,
Perfectly.
It was amazing.
I think it was a very reasonable request.
So the other thing that I want to mention is that, you know, with one of the things that's been really interesting for the past 2 projects. So first of all, we commissioned Nick in 2018. We premiered his work in 2019. We also commissioned Tony in 2019 and premiered his work, which is in my background, called Dust Bowl in 2020, literally right before the pandemic. And actually what's so interesting about this is that literally the week before everything shut down, the first scene of Dust Bowl was a choir coming out and coughing because of all the dust, with all the dust storms and everything, and coughing. So it was very strange when the next week, like, you know, we shut down and, you know, COVID was a thing. But what I wanted to say is that one of the things that I'm noticing about all these projects is that, like, when we did Betty's Notebook, I think for Nick it was, and Nick, you might elaborate on this, but I think for Nick it was out of character to create, you know, arrangements of jazz tunes. And similarly in Dust Bowl, like, I encouraged Tony to do like folky sounds, and like Tony was also like, I don't know if this should work, but it worked brilliantly. And in this case, you know, I think like what's so cool about this is that you're right. Like to Nick's points before, it's a complete reset. It's something completely different, and yet it like bridges the gap here between everything. So I think Betty's Radio, I agree, it's one of my favorites as well. And as you're able to turn through different jazz standards, it adds a different color and character to the piece as a whole, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, writing the jazz standards was something that I found to be very refreshing, because I got to use a different side of my brain, and I got to look at music that I don't normally look at, and really just to praise those songwriters who show the highest level of craftsmanship. You look at Jerome Kern, you look at Richard Rodgers, you look at Cole Porter, George Gershwin. These guys showed just great ingenuity. I mean, the songs of George Gershwin, in my opinion, are just as well crafted as like Mendelssohn's Songs Without Words. They're short. You have everything in there that you need. His brother's lyrics are very clever, and the music itself is full of harmony and rhythm that is never boring. And so I try to do that for Betty's Notebook to show, you know, this time period had so much variety within a formulaic structure of the American song form, but they did so much with that. And I don't know if Tony has any comments about using that side of his brain. The because Tony has a background with some jazz.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm a guitar player and a trumpeter, and so like actually having that sort of the experience of also I've played in shows and pits and jazz ensembles and combos, but also I work in the choral world and a classical world as a conductor and a composer. So it's like being able to mix those two things, and having time in the studio doing both those things was what really was exciting about this project for me, because it was like the bringing together of, you know, my academic learnedness and also the stuff I love to do. Not that I don't love the classical side of the music I make. I absolutely love that. Just want to clarify in case anyone.
Just in case you get any angry emails from students or
we
colleagues.
represent the classical world, and we don't like what you say.
Also, can we just talk, Tony? You know, I don't know if our audience knows this, that Tony has synesthesia, which is actually being able to hear pitches or being able to see pitches with color. And I know that that's like kind of a rare thing with people, but it's a thing, and it's one of the things that totally like blew me away about Tony. Like, he's able to hear sounds so clearly, and I think part of that has to do with the colors that he sees visually. Is that correct, Tony?
Yeah, and it's actually not as rare as you might think. 1% of the population has some sort of. Sorry.
Betty Fire just sold for 11.5 to Veritas, so Metapurse. So congratulations. And now
Congratulations, Veritas.
Congrats, Veritas. Nice.
of you. And now we're waiting for the big one, the master.
Wow. The master.
The master. Here we go. Woo!
Oh, man. This is nuts.
Drama.
Woo! Last one.
And you could own it all. And you even get 7 free little yellow notebooks and a pen.
Someone needs to Photoshop Sam's head into a Van White body. That is something I would pay to see.
Oh, man.
For the
Just-
is ending at 52 past the hour, so 3:52 ET. So in 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes.
Got it. Cool.
But let's see what happens. 'Cause currently the bid is for, I think it's Veritas. So
I'm still waiting to hear Nicholas's auctioneer voice.
yeah, you have to do it for the master.
I am. Once this goes to 100 ETH, you will hear it.
Challenge. New challenge.
Oh, my God. That's crazy.
It's like the Jerry Lewis telethon. We got to get all these acts on the stage. Jamie Foxx is on in 2 minutes, everyone, just so you know.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. This is so cool.
So
Unfreaking believable.
for the master is by Metapurse for 56.56 ETH, which is $215,989.
Awesome. Very cool. So let's talk about the master for a second. Bryan, we should pull up the sketches of the physical radio that we have, or that we sort of talked about. So let's just talk about this. The owner of the master gets a physical radio, and that's sort of in the process of being made and will be made in about like 5 to 6 months per se. But it was actually the idea of Bryan to do it in the first place. So when we were talking, Bryan was like, well, what if we created like a physical object with it? And I was like, Bryan, you're crazy. And then I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. So, you know, and as I'm sure many of the choir members and Tony and Nick and everybody in this room at this point knows, like, I'm always up for crazy things, and I always put myself in situations that are like stupid crazy. And so with the selling of the master owner gets a physical radio that will automatically update basically over time as the piece is updated, audio and visuals. There will be a screen and speakers and all of that stuff. But yeah, Bryan, do you have those sketches?
Yeah, I just put my initial sketch is there if you can share it, Nicole. But essentially, yeah, when we talked about the experience and how people could experience this, and that kind of fell into this idea of, well, can we build this as something that someone who owns this can show it to people easily? And this idea of having a physical radio that changes from day to day is such a cool way of expanding on what Async already does, because they already have, like an Apple TV app where you can see the art on your television and see it change from day to day. And so it was like, well, what if we take that idea and we actually build it into this radio so that, you could put this into a space, a gallery space, and then you'll hear the song, experience it, and also get another level of that radio vibe to it. And so, there's my very rough sketch early on that I sent to Sam. So it was kind of like, what if we put a TV inside of an old radio, or and so from there we found a bunch of old radios, and now we're kind of pulling them apart, and we're kind of configure them in a way that they can be connected to the internet, show this visual, and have nice speakers so that you can experience it. And so I think it's a really a fun way of kind of creating this physical object to represent this, very new age digital idea. And so that's kind of the big idea behind it. And so it'll be fun to see once that's there, that can travel around, go from place to place, be showcased in different settings, and, experienced in different rooms. And, our piece already has this kind of idea of changing what it sounds like in a room, but you will have this physical thing. And depending on the size of the room it's in, you're going to experience this in a different way. So it adds another level of this kind of almost programmability, but bringing it into a physical sense.
Absolutely. Context matters. And when the person is able to actually turn on the radio and do everything and experience it, they're literally in the shoes of Betty Clank, which is what we going 360 degrees back. So, whew. Wow. So it looks like we just sold the final piece, and the final piece is sold to MetaPurse at $215,919, which is 56.
Woo!
How much is that, Nicole? Is that 56 ETH or is that
56.56?
56 point,
Nice.
56.56. Love it. Oh man. Wow. What an amazing thing.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Thank you. And congratulations, everybody.
I
Wow.
want to thank Bryan, Sam, Tony, Trey, Rick, if you're watching, the singers with me here today, and also all the singers. And I also wanted to say one point I was trying to make earlier, but we got so excited with the bids, is that music was first notated for vocal music. That's what we preserved centuries ago. And now we're moving into a new way of documenting on the blockchain. And it's not without some irony that it's also vocal music. Thank you, MetaPurse.
And
That's really cool.
I will just say Lisa Leong from Async just said that this is the highest single Async token sale it's in history on the Async art platform. So we've actually just like broken a record as a Verdigris Ensemble on the
Amazing.
Async art platform.
Yeah.
Amazing. Very congratulations to everybody. This is just amazing.
Congratulations, everyone.
And a big, shout out to Sam, who's being very, humble about this. But
Yes.
he's not just a conductor of music, but he conducted this project, and he got it to the finish line every step of the way.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Without Sam, there's no project.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Well, it takes a community, it takes a village to turn these things on and to get these things done. So I view this as a victory for everyone. And I'm just so thankful. I'm thankful for. I just want to give a shout out quickly to our board of directors on Verdigris Ensemble who rallied for this process, for all of the collaborators, Nick, and Tony, Bryan, Trey, and several other people that were a part of this project that edited behind the scenes and were there at Luminous Sound. I want to give a big shout out to the choir that literally on very short notice got together in like a span of less than 8 weeks, was able to not only come in completely prepared, but sing it really well and take direction really well from myself and Tony. And so all the soloists in Verdigris, and of course to like the acing team for this, and for everyone, and of course to Nicole from Vertical Crypto Art, to the staff at Verdigris Ensemble. It honestly, like, it takes a village to get this stuff done. So thank you guys so much, and this is amazing. One of the most significant days of my life.
Celebrating tonight or this afternoon or whenever, but congratulations. This is a true historic moment, and it opens up so many possibilities for, not music as a whole, but classical music really. So it's really an important moment. So really congratulations, and congratulations to Metapers, who I'm sure will do great things with the piece.
Amazing.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
You guys.
Have a
Talk soon.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.